Why do I always cry when I'm angry? This is a great question. For many people, crying when they feel angry feels like a betrayal of some sort, which actually makes a lot of sense because many of us have a pretty damaged relationship with crying itself. Sometimes it gets labeled as incompetence or weakness, and then sometimes it actually ends up getting labeled as manipulation. And so, before I go any further, I want to remind you that this is psychoeducation and not therapy. So, I'm going to name 3 reasons why this might be happening for you so you can take what works and leave what doesn't. So, the 3 possible reasons are your nervous system, the emotions that sit underneath anger, and how you've been socialized. And then for some folks, there's a 4th layer underneath all of them that contributes to why this is happening. So, let's start with your nervous system. When you get angry, your amygdala floods your body with stress hormones. So cortisol and adrenaline spike simultaneously, which then moves your entire system into a high activation state. Now, if that intensity exceeds what your nervous system can process, tears become somewhat of a pressure release valve. This is what we call emotional flooding. Now, crying is the body hitting its limit before it shuts down or escalates. The tears can be seen as the overflow of this, not the emotion. And then what happens after we cry is that it releases oxytocin and endogenous opioids. So those are natural pain relieving chemicals your body produces on its own. So that's the sense of calm you might feel after crying. It's essentially a biochemical response with your body regulating itself. So then we get into layer 2, which is the emotions underneath the anger. Now, depending on the clinical framework you're working in, anger is understood differently. In some models, it is a primary emotion, and in others, it functions as a secondary one, meaning something else was felt first. That being said, what most frameworks agree on is that anger rarely shows up or travels alone. Something often comes before it. Perhaps it's a perceived threat, like a boundary that was crossed, or a moment of feeling unseen or powerless. These are just examples. Essentially, your brain registered danger first, and anger was the response that followed. Now, when that anger peaks, the more vulnerable emotions underneath it begin to surface alongside it. For example, fear of losing the relationship, or shame about needing something, possibly just the grief about being dismissed. These are the emotions that tend to produce tears. The anger activated the system, but then the pain underneath it is what ends up spilling out. And then layer 3, how you were socialized. If you grew up in a home where anger was not safe to express, your nervous system likely learned to reroute it, and crying was maybe more tolerated. Not necessarily okay, but possibly more tolerated than anger, because it carried less consequences. So over time, your body defaulted to tears instead of direct anger expression. And this is especially common for women and people socialized as female or assigned female at birth, who are conditioned from childhood to convert anger into sadness. The body doesn't forget what was safe and what wasn't. And then the 4th layer is complex trauma. When crying during anger feels chronic or disproportionate, it can signal something deeper. It might mean the nervous system is operating from old attachment wounds or a history where expressing anger led to abandonment, punishment, or shame. Essentially, the body learned that anger was dangerous, and it learned to collapse into tears as a way to survive that danger. Now, clinically, this can look like a hybrid freeze and fawn response. And it's really important to note here that this is not a character flaw, and it is not you being too much. It is an adaptation, and it makes complete sense given what the nervous system lived through and learned to survive through. So ultimately, the clinical goal here is not to stop crying. It's not possible. But it is to expand your window of tolerance so that your nervous system doesn't reach that overflow point as quickly, and you feel as though you have more of a say in your reactions and how you process information that comes to you. I hope this was helpful.